Hello again. So, I've been examining how we tend to misread reality. Specifically, we miss how the systems we build move and change over time. We expect linear change, but we get a series of curves. First, we looked at growth and how this is already a series of complex waveforms. Then we looked at distribution and how both value and effort tends to form clusters rather than showing up evenly in a rather unfair manner. Now I embark on part 5 of the series, Misreading the Shape of Reality, a series examining the hidden structures shaping business, growth, and human systems. And today I look at the game we play and the effect our and its networks have on it and our business within it. Networks have a multiplying effect on both value and effort, but it doesn't always show up in the obvious places. Life is cruel, isn't it? So let's return to my client, our founder, with the garden and design and build business. At this point, we've looked at 2 ways that the client misread their situation. Stuck in a very early growth mindset, they failed to recognise that the business was not moving in a straight line and the effort within was not translating evenly into results. After spending some time with me, timing and leverage began to make sense and the curve was visible. The concentration of value was clear. I could also see that they were about to experience another bump. A bump with good and bad, that we might call right place, wrong time. When the first element happens to you, it puts you into summer, when things happen really quickly. It makes you busy, it speeds things up, but it can reveal problems fast. And in my client's business, there were kinks to iron out before this level of summer arrived. Now, as with many founders, they took the view, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But both opportunity and resulting challenge were just on the horizon and not really in their sight yet. I dropped the point, thinking everything in its own time. I had to let it go, but for me, something still lingered. Even with non-linear and value concentration addressed, which was a great improvement, I could see the next moment hovering on that horizon, what I thought of as the final layer that would impact them, the inevitability that no business operates in isolation. Now, it's tempting to think of a business as a contained system. Inputs go in, outputs come out. The task of the founder is to optimize what happens in between. Improve the product, refine the sales process, tighten operations, manage the team. All of this matters, but there is more to the picture. Every business sits within a wider network. Customers interact with one another. Ideas travel beyond the boundaries of the organisation. Reputation forms not just through what is said, but through how it's shared, repeated and interpreted. The value of what you build is not determined solely by its intrinsic quality. It's shaped by how it connects with other people. Now, Robert Metcalfe articulated this through a simple but powerful observation that became a revolutionary thesis. He proposed that the value of a network grows in proportion to the square of its participants. 10 connected users do not create twice the value of 5, they create something closer to 4 times the value. At a certain point, this changes the experience of growth entirely for the founder. In the early stages, progress feels dependent on effort. Each new customer is acquired through deliberate action. Each relationship requires attention. Growth is something that must be pushed. But if the work is delivered and lands well, gradually something begins to shift. Connections begin to reinforce one another. Customers refer others. Conversations extend beyond the original point of contact as the network starts to generate its own momentum. From the outside, it kind of looks like luck, but it's not. We simply start to get by with a little help. It's a structural inevitability that arises from fulfilling a need with good service. Our founder went away happy and, as expected, after a short while began to notice something. While in the early years, almost every project arrived through deliberate effort, Instagram posts were carefully produced, local advertising was tested, every lead felt individually earned, and relationships with architects and suppliers were useful but largely transactional. Gradually, the dynamic started to shift. Past clients began referring neighbours. Architects started introducing projects proactively because they delivery team had become trusted, and Instagram no longer functioned merely as marketing, but as social proof reinforcing conversations already happening elsewhere. The network surrounding the business had become denser, and with the density came leverage. A single successful project generated 3 more within 18 months. One architect relationship unlocked an entire cluster of higher value projects. Reputation began moving ahead of the founder rather than relying entirely on them. But as momentum increased, so did strain. The founder, we looked at this in parts 2 and 4 of this series, could no longer personally maintain every client relationship. He couldn't oversee every project and couldn't coordinate every contractor interaction. Communication pathways multiplied rapidly. Small misunderstandings between design, installation, and subcontractors began creating disproportionate friction. And what once functioned naturally through proximity and trust now required different systems, structure, and processes. The network had become an asset, but it had also become a complexity of problems. We can clearly see the benefits of Metcalfe's expression, and yet even that underestimates what is possible when networks deepen. David Reed extended the idea further, recognizing that when networks enable the formation of groups inside them, rather than just connections themselves, the value increases exponentially. He said it's no longer simply the number of participants that matters, but the number of possible subgroups that can form within them. And this is the difference between an audience and a community. An audience consumes, a community interacts. Once interaction takes hold, the value begins to emerge within the network itself. It's no longer entirely dependent on the founder or the central organization. It becomes distributed, generative, and far more resilient. We see this most acutely across social media and its explosive growth and capture of society. But this also helps explain a phenomenon that many founders encounter but struggle to define. For a long period, a business feels effortful. Each step forward needs to be earned. Progress is real, but it's really hard won. Then, without a clear moment of transition, friction reduces and things begin to move freely. Opportunities appear with less direct input. Relationships deepen. The system of acquisition feels lighter. Nothing fundamental has changed in the product or the capabilities, but the network reaches a level of density where it begins to sustain itself. And this is where the ideas from earlier parts of the series converge. The curve was always present, but the network truly activates it. The concentration of value becomes more visible as interactions multiply, and what once required force begins to respond instead to structure. The implications of Metcalfe and Reed actually extend far beyond technology. Before the internet era, businesses were largely valued through relatively linear assumptions. More factories, more staff, more distribution generally meant proportionally more output. Scale was powerful, but it was expensive. Valuations therefore remain tied fairly closely to present earnings and tangible assets. Network businesses changed that logic. Once investors began to understand the implications of Metcalfe's law, markets started pricing not merely current profitability, but the future value of connectivity itself. Price to earnings ratios themselves began to shift because markets were no longer valuing output alone. They valued the future compounding potential of the network. A platform with twice the users was not perceived as twice as valuable, but exponentially more strategically important if network effects became dominant. And this was one of the hidden forces beneath the dot-com bubble. While much of the speculation may have since proved irrational, the market had correctly identified something profound. Networks obeyed different economic rules to traditional industrial businesses. Blockchain pushed this idea further still. The network itself became investable, and users became participants, stakeholders, and sometimes speculators simultaneously. Value no longer sits neatly inside a company balance sheet, but increasingly within the ecosystem that surrounds it. In many ways, the last 25 years of markets can be read as a gradual repricing of networks themselves. However, in the world of a founder and across many systems involving people, just as momentum builds, another force emerges: constraint. The network creates the momentum. Human limitation determines how long that momentum can be sustained before it starts to strain. And in our last episode in this series, I shall look at the constraints that we humans put on the power of our networks, just because of the fact that we are people. I'll also look at what to look for to make things really last the test of time. So, this week, our musical eggs. Right Place, Wrong Time, you might have guessed, was the song by Dr. John. Everything in Its Own Time is a song by the Indigo Girls. If It Ain't Broke is from If It Ain't Broke by Sonny Cleveland. And Get By With a Little Help is, of course, a line from the Beatles, or an excerpt from the Beatles, With a Little Help from My Friends by the Beatles. So I hope you enjoyed the piece. You found it useful. Please do subscribe, like, so we can help distribute it to others. And I will see you next week.